Jay, I have absolutely no idea if you're going to watch this video, but I sincerely hope that you do, if anything, at least this short section, because I want to tell you in full sincerity that this gunship is one of, if not the, best custom builds that I've ever done. While there are certainly some flaws that I will get into, this build stands above everything else that I have ever put together for this channel. The accuracy, the details, the techniques used to put this together, and how fun of a build it was is unmatched by anything else. This is seriously the single best custom build I've ever done. Not just the best custom gunship, which it also is, but the best build ever. To the rest of you who may be wondering if this is worth getting, the answer is absolutely 100% yes. It is a little expensive for sure, however the end result is absolutely worth it. And if you're wondering should you get this or Dave Customs, to me the answer is quite simple, and it is sitting right in front of you. So with that said though, let's get some technical stuff out of the way. First, this build comes from the YouTuber RichBoyJhae's, who is currently working on a Camino mock that you should definitely check out, and he has made a whole ton of minifig scale vehicles and ships from Star Wars. The AT-AT that's on BrickVault's website, he's the guy who created it. And this is the first build of his that I've been able to show off on this channel, even though I own all of his instructions, because at some point I want to get to them. Now his builds are extremely intricate, especially when you compare them to literally anyone else, but they are also the most accurate by far. And one thing that I personally love about his builds is that he uses the snot technique, which for those of you who don't know stands for studs not on top, and that gives this gunship the incredibly smooth look that you see, and I personally just love. It really makes this look just like the actual gunship while still being Lego. RichBoyJhae's does offer 3 different versions of the gunship, the Clone Wars, Episode 2, and the Munilins. Now I've shown off both of those other versions, and personally this was my favorite out of the ones he had, so I had to go with the Episode 2 version. And this version of the gunship contains 3,344 pieces, which is actually more than the UCS gunship has, despite being about a third of the size. Now when the UCS gunship came out, I know a lot of people were hoping that it would be minifig scale, and I was personally one of those that didn't want it to be because UCS ships should be big, but here's RichBoyJhae's showing me that you can have a UCS ship in minifig scale. Okay, like I knew that we could do that, but something like this would have just blown everyone out of the water if it was the official version. Now, like I said, this version of the gunship is minifig scale, everything RichBoyJhae's does, so here is Cody standing in it just so you can see how big this thing really is. It's pretty accurate, like I said, so it's not huge, but it definitely has a footprint as well. When RichBoyJhae's first released the video announcing the set, I wanted to buy the instructions immediately, but I did wait to see what other people thought. Like I said, I know that his builds tend to be very intricate, and this was no exception. Some of my viewers bought this and told me just how unique this build is. There are a lot of illegal techniques and very interesting techniques used to get these different shapes and curves that the gunship requires. There's even a section in the instructions that tells you not to put much pressure on the top of the build after that point, as it's not designed for that, which I have a tiny gripe with because it is pretty early on in the instructions and I thought it might be a big deal, but ultimately the design is so well done that it never really comes into play and it's not an issue. But one of those people who reached out to me, knowing that I tend to build using non-Lego, told me they would be really interested to see how something like this would turn out. With the illegal techniques and interesting choices used, the build can still be quite delicate even if you use real Lego, so I figured it would be a really good test to use for non-Lego pieces. If I could build something like this using Go Brick pieces that I could buy off of WeBrick, then I think it could finally show just how good non-LEGO really is now, and hopefully help show some of you that it's no longer the low-quality Chinese knockoff that it used to be. I know that I won't convince everybody or even most of you, but I had the opportunity to buy this thing for $250 cheaper than getting it in real LEGO and hopefully make a statement. And I can very gladly tell you that I had zero issues putting this together that I wouldn't have had with normal LEGO. I mean, I had zero issues putting this thing together anyway, and while the build is certainly still delicate and I really don't want to be moving it too much, like I said, everyone who I know who got this using real LEGO has told me the same thing. In fact, the one gripe that I have about this thing is a really stupid one. The stand is a separate XML file, and it really, in my opinion, should just be one, considering the type of build that this is. With how delicate it is, you really don't want to have to be moving this thing or laying it on the ground on its own. Even having it on this box, which I hope you can excuse me for by the way, is still not really ideal. The stand really should just be a part of the build. Now, when Jay made his video, part of the reason I wanted to buy this immediately was when he showed a close-up of this section here. And I saw all of the tiny pieces coming together in different ways to make this perfectly smooth wall and section of the gunship. There are far easier ways to do this. I mean, just look at literally any other custom gunship on the market, but Jay decided to do his own thing. And it showed me the mindset that he had when creating this. It wasn't just about putting something out there and getting the product done. No, I'm sure he knew that people would buy it no matter what, so I'm glad that he took the time to make something truly great. I think it's clear that he didn't envision this as something that he could sell first. Instead, it was a piece of art that he wanted to get right, knowing that the purchasability would come with it. And there's one area on this build that shows you just how much attention to detail RichBoyJhae really had. This is something that not really anyone else has done on their gunships, and it's quite obvious. It's this gray section here. He actually points this out in his video as well, saying that people didn't realize it was there until the UCS gunship came out, and I think he's absolutely correct in saying that. But again, it shows that Jay's focus is on making these things as accurate as possible, which when I'm looking at what mocks to buy and build is one of my top priorities. It's also kind of insane because you don't really get to see it that well in the actual movie, but it is there. Now, unfortunately, it's not all great. Like I said, there were some problematic areas that really just come from how intricate this thing is, and one of those sections is the front. The techniques used here are just some of the most insane that I've ever seen, and I just don't understand how anyone can even think about doing it. Not in the way of like, oh my goodness, like he's so stupid or insane for doing it, but in the way of how does anyone envision this in their mind? How does anyone see the gunship and then be able to figure out that configuring the pieces in such a way like it is here makes it work? Now, I do say work loosely because this is the one area that I had any issues with, as some of the connections are using only one stud, if that, and it is kind of loose. You really don't want to be touching anything up here. I mean, just to show you how slightly over-engineered some aspects of this are, look at the panel right next to the ball turret there. There's brackets holding tiles and plates, and there's panels, and what you don't see is that there are droid arms on the other side clipping it into place. It really is so expertly engineered. Like I said, maybe a little over-engineered at points, but the end result of it is still absolutely worth it. I also love this interior section. It's one of the main reasons that I wanted to get this particular gunship. I think there's a lot of open space here, which is nice, but I always loved having this like little canopy net thing. Keep in mind that for me, the introduction to the gunship outside of episode 2 was with the Munilist version, which has this there, and I kind of just always thought that it was part of the gunship, so I really do love that RichBoyJhae included it, and there's just so many details here. It's just insane. Like, the only way for you to really see it all is to just build it yourself. I mean, look, it's not even just the net. He has like ingots and bars and lightsaber pieces and hilts connecting all of this together to make the top of a gunship that you're probably never actually going to look at or see because you're looking at the entire ship as a whole, but it's still there. Oh, I also just want to briefly mention that the cockpit is of course very accurate as well. You can put minifigures inside. I just am not going to with this one because again, very fragile. It's a little bit more intricate than just open piece and put inside, so know that you can, but I'm just not going to. Now this section back here is also one of my favorites. I know that's a little weird to say because it's just like the smooth top of the gunship, so whatever, but I love how this connects to everything else. Now I actually had some issue putting this section in here for no other reason than I was just being stupid and couldn't figure it out, but once I did, it slides in just so well and connects everything so perfectly. Now I did take this apart just a little bit to show you here that the wings also connect into the back here in a few different ways, and one of them are those studs that you see sticking out there. They clip into Technic pieces to help hold it in place, along with other connections as well, but I just wanted to show you how much thought goes into this, and when I keep saying the word intricate, what I mean. It's things like that where, you know, that's a very easy thing that just could have been missed or not included, yet RichBoyJhae thought about it and it adds just a little bit more strength to this build. And then of course you have the missiles back here, or rockets or whatever, which are interesting. I don't know. This has just never really been my favorite part of the gunship. I think it's nice, he did a good job here, that's fine. And then there's this back section which I would highly recommend you just do not touch once you put it on. It's not super fragile, but it's also not connected very strongly. Still, I love how this looks with the gold pieces, and then those are a bunch of ski pieces stacked on top of each other. And then of course right underneath that is the rear turret, which you cannot really move, but I think that's fine. Now, needless to say, the doors do open. It's an extremely smooth process, and one that is done in a completely different way than any other LEGO gunship that I've seen. I love RichBoyJhae's design of this. There's no clear pieces or anything, there's just holes where holes should be, and he managed to get the curves and everything done perfectly on this. The opening and closing mechanism is extremely smooth as well and doesn't really get in the way of anything, but this is another one of the reasons that I think the build should just be integrated into the stand. Or you know what I mean, the stand should be part of the normal build and not a separate thing, because opening and closing this does get in the way of the ground, which doesn't happen when it's on a stand. Now, one area that I have a love-hate relationship with are the wings. I love the wings. I think the wings themselves are great. I love the snot technique used. I love how smooth they are. I love that the ball turrets are not these giant things like every other gunship did. I just love how this has turned out. I also like the look of the raised area there. I don't really know what that part would be called. It's just still part of the wing, you know what I mean. I don't like the techniques used. Again, they are extremely fragile here, and touching them at all just kind of makes them pop off, but once it's in place, it should be fine. However, the second biggest area that I had any sort of issue with outside of the front is the underside of the wing, which for some reason just never really wanted to stay in place. In fact, here's kind of what tends to happen. As I was getting ready to move this back from my filming location to where it is on the shelf, the underside of the left wing kinda just popped out of place, which I know people are gonna say is because of the non-LEGO pieces, but in reality, this is a rather large section of a build that's not really supported in any way. It's hanging underneath another section and then has an entire wing sitting on top of it. This is one area of the build that could have been a little better, but again, just do your best to absolutely not touch it. I think earlier in the video I accidentally called this area the engines. I know that they are the rocket launchers. It is 11:11 at night and the Avalanche just secured their first trip to the Stanley Cup Finals in 21 years, so I'm a little excited and focused on other things. But these areas were a pretty simple build. I don't really have much to say about them. Oh, and then lastly, and I intentionally kept this for last, are the ball turrets on the side. This was not designed by RichBoyJhae. He says as much in his video. It's actually designed by Dave Customs. Now, the one thing I don't really like about this is that you do have to cut down these tubes, and if you cut them wrong, then you end up like I have here. It is a great design, but if you want to put a minifigure inside, it's going to be more hassle than it's really worth. However, they're more than capable of moving around and swiveling around. I think it's a great addition and personally one of my favorite aspects of the gunship. And with all of that said, there's not really much else to say outside of what I already did at the beginning. This is a nearly perfect build. Yes, I know that I had some complaints, I know that I keep saying it's fragile, but really at the end of the day, you just don't get much better than this. When you're going to build a mock of any sort, regardless of what type of pieces that you use, you're always going to sacrifice some stability for the sake of the look. And I think RichBoyJhae managed to capture that perfectly, where even though some aspects of this are a little on the fragile side, it's not like it's gonna fall apart in your hands like several other builds that I've had to put together. For instance, if you remember back to when I was building Brick Vault's gunship, even that fell apart on me when I was putting it together, and it was far less intricate than this thing. And while I unfortunately sold that version of the gunship and can't do a comparison, I don't think there really is one anyway. This one is just better in literally every single aspect. There's not to say that Dave Customs isn't good. No, of course not. I still like Dave Customs versions and I plan to get his Plo Koon one at some point, but honestly, this gunship from RichBoyJhae is the single best one out there. There just is no comparison. Now, I have officially lost my voice from the excitement of the avalanche, so let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments down below. What other builds from RichBoyJhae should I do? And if you want a chance at winning a custom LEGO Jedi Bob, make sure you check out my monthly minifig giveaways, and to get extra entries into that, you can always support me on Patreon like all of these wonderful people on screen do, and you can get shoutouts like Jonathan. Thank you all so much for watching, and go Avs!